friends, this here is David Bose. Today is March the 19th, 2015. It's wonderful to see everybody today. Well, today, friends, I want to get in a little bit more to the subject that we've been covering about the Sumerian Tablets. It is packed with amazing things. It is absolutely fascinating, friends. And any of you who are speculating about reading some of this and getting into this and imagining in your mind that, well, it's just a story, I've heard it now. You haven't heard it. It's not just a story. There are, I get a lot of comments of people who are saying, oh, Dave, get off the subject. You're going down the wrong road. You don't know what you're talking about. Stitchin's made all these mistakes and he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know how to translate. Well, friends, what I suggest is that people who are saying this to me need to do a little more investigation for themselves. You never heard me say that, Zachariah Stitchin knows everything. I don't think he knows. I mean, there might be a lot of propaganda coming out of his mouth. I really don't listen to him very much. This is ancient cuneiform tablets that have been found not only in Samaria but in Babylon, Akkadian. These stories, it isn't like it's conjectural. This is the same story that's coming out of Greece that we all grew up with, the Titans and all the gods who came down to the earth and mated with humankind. And it isn't just this, that scenario. It's the entire thing, the flood, the dates. Have you not read the Egyptian timeline of their kings who ruled thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years into our history? And they said, oh, it's, as Christians, we heard all this for years about how it's only mythology, it's ridiculous. Okay, well, they said the same thing about the Bible when the Bible said that Adam was 930 years old. It's the same pattern. But there's a very interesting thing that I'm going to reveal in this video about that, about dates, and it has to do with the fact that each period of time, according to the ancient cuneiform text, was a shar, which has to do with the ancient way of counting time. We still use it today. There's 360 degrees in a circle. And according to that ancient system, each shar was 3,600 years. And it was divided into 60, and it was divided into 12. And these numbers go all the way back and have never really changed. Variables of this system. We use the decimal system, or the system that we use. We count by 10. In those days, they counted by 60 and by 10. It was a much more complicated system. But none of this is conjectural. The Akkadians, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Egyptians all talked about their gods, how they ruled, and for thousands and thousands of years. Their history goes back for hundreds of thousands of years. And, now that alone, for some people, would say, well, it's mythology, that's impossible, it can't be. But that's it, friends. If you're serious about learning what is the truth, then you cannot close your eyes to this, turn a blind eye to all of this information that's coming out of virtually every ancient kingdom, empire, Aztec, Inca, west, east, north. All of them have these long historical records, and they've been out there for a long time. We've just been ignoring it. And so, friends, I want to cover some of this in this video. It is fascinating information. I want to get right into it and talk a little bit more about Nibiru, because a lot of people are assuming that this Nibiru is some kind of a planet. And, and if you imagine this planet being way out beyond Pluto, which, and I've said before it could be, this is what one theory is. But, it's when you really get into this and you start imagining in your mind that a species of beings that can mate with humans, therefore they would have to be almost identical to the humanoid that we know, it would seem illogical that they could exist on a planet that goes around the sun every 3,600 years that's way out beyond Pluto. And not only that, it would seem illogical that their orbit would be 3,600 years, because that's astronomical for the solar system. It only takes us a short time to go around the sun, and most of the planets, you know, is the same thing. So even if that planet was twice as far as Pluto, or 3 or 4 times as far out, it would seem illogical for it to take 3,600 years. So what does the word Nibiru mean? Well, it doesn't actually say the planet Nibiru, and it doesn't actually say that the other planets. It doesn't call them planets per se. What it does is it gives each of these places a name, and some of them it does mention their surface, their gravity, and things like that, their colors, and we know what they're talking about. But when it comes to Nibiru, it doesn't actually say that it's, it doesn't describe it so that we can understand it as one of the planets. So we have to decide what is it that they're talking about, because it seems like it only comes into play with the Earth every 3,600 years. And that would be an amazing thing if it were just rotating around the solar system. Well, what I'm going to get into today is, as I've said, we've already talked about how this is the same information that we get out of Egypt, Babylon, Akkadian records, all of these other things. They all invariably mention the home of the gods, which is not a planet around the solar system, but what is actually another star that is in the distance. As you probably all have heard and read in the Egyptian records, they talk about Orion a lot. And if you know anything about the pyramids, you know that the queen's chamber that goes down inside the pyramid is like a shaft that if you look up through that shaft, you'll notice it point to Cyrus, which is, Osiris, in the constellation Orion. Well, interestingly enough, our Bible that we have, that we've cherished for these thousands of years as our sacred history, speaks of this very same star and this constellation. And the Bible doesn't mention all of the stars by name, of course. It only mentions 3 or 4 stars, and of course the moon. It mentions the stars, but it never gives them names. The Bible mentions Orion by name. It also mentions the Pleiades. Well, this is interesting. Oh, it also mentions Arcturus. But this is interesting, friends, because it's the very same stars that is mentioned by all the other ancient writings, Akkadian, Sumerian, Babylonian tablets, and Egyptian. It's given different names. But what's also interesting, and this also confirms the very absolute amazing nature of these tablets, because if this was simply fantasy, how would they even know about these stars? Because let me fill you in about the place called the Pleiades. If you look up in the sky, now they wouldn't possibly know this some 5,000 years ago in Egypt. They couldn't possibly know this unless they had sophisticated methods of knowing the heavens and mapping the stars, what human beings, as far as we know, didn't even have a foggy idea of until the last 500 years. And some of the planets we haven't even thought about until the last generation. um, you know this is all recent to modern man, to the knowledge of the stars. And yet they spoke of these specific stars in the Bible and the same specific stars in the Sumerian Tablets. And here's what's so interesting about the Pleiades. You look up into the night sky, and if you're just an observer like all of us are, we'll just notice a bunch of stars. And it takes a lot of investigation with the human eye to notice anything different about one star over another. But over thousands of years of observation, they discovered some of these lights in the sky didn't move in the same pattern as the other stars. Well, they discovered some of these were planets. They were closer to the Earth and they're revolving around the sun, so they're going to have a different pattern. Whereas the entire solar system wasn't revolving around the stars or anything, so it was going to be the stars, because we spin, these stars are going to move all together in a similar fashion. But they noticed there are certain stars that move differently. And in fact, it wasn't just the planets that move differently, as you would expect them to move differently because they are close and they are also in the same orbit as we are around the sun. But they also noticed that there was a two or three other stars or that had slightly different orbits. Now, modern science has discovered that one of these stars that they call the Pleiades, it's Alcyon. It's in the Pleiades. They discovered it's very close to the Earth. There's a few stars that are the closest ones to our sun. There's a lot of speculation about twin binary stars that may be twins to the sun. The thing about that is that if you look into the sky, and the scientists who have these big telescopes, they can see that almost all of the stars in the sky have twins. They have other stars that are like, they share this. They have planets together, and they're like traveling in the same spot together. And this is something that is almost with every star. But for a long time, we've said, well, the Earth is different. The sun is different. It's just an exception. We only have one star. But with various methods of observation, they have discovered that Alcyon seems to be not only close to our sun, very close, one of the closest stars, but we seem to be moving in some sort of pattern with that star. And it's almost as if, it is as if we are slightly going around and following that star. It's ahead of us on this long Orion, arm of the nebula or of the galaxy. And we are simply swirling through this arm, and it's ahead of us, not very far, and we're going around it. Just like we are going around the sun is going around Alcyon. And then ahead of that Alcyon is the constellation Orion. Now that's the Pleiades I was talking about with the Alcyon, but ahead of that is the constellation Orion. And that is the star Sirius, which is also close to in our vicinity. And it appears that Alcyon is following and circling the star Sirius. And this seems to be following and circling the central sun of the galaxy. So, friends, what does Nibiru mean? It seems to be the Sumerian word for the Egyptian Sirius. The name Nibiru means the place of the crossing. Now, this star is also called the one who shepherds or leads the other planets. And so it's almost what it's doing is describing some object that is the cause of the motions of our solar system. And those objects that are following it. It is the shepherd, and it is the place of the crossing, because when you go around an entire 360 degrees, you are doing the crossing, or the orbit. And so it is that object that we are orbiting, and it is the point of the orbit. So this is what, now, no doubt there are some difficulties when if you might notice this when you've tried to read some of these writings. I think they purposely mistranslate. It's not that they mistranslate. Same with the Bible. It's like they write it in some kind of backwards, forwards, thing. We're English here, and we speak, I went to the store. We don't say, to the store I went. It gets pretty confusing when you start jumbling the words up as they do. I don't know, but I believe they do that on purpose, friends, to confuse us so that we cannot read it fluently. And then they translate words like that, like crossing and stuff, and so it becomes difficult, and you've got all this speculation because of the translations. But it is definitely something that is hard to comprehend. It takes lots of years of study, but it is worth it, friends, because this is our history. It's in every nation, kingdom, ancient peoples. All of them have had the same stories. The same story we hear from the Aztecs clear across the ocean. And it's very interesting, friends, because if you decide to read these Sumerian tablets, and I recommend that you do, and remember, you got to go slow, because I told you that the translation's odd. They got words going, sentences going backwards and forwards, and it's very difficult to follow. And because of that, there's a lot of great controversy over where these places were, first of all, you've got to know the timetable when you read it. Our Bible, the way it is written and the way the Christians have explained it to us for so long, we think that Adam was made 6,000 years ago. This is universal among Christian peoples, and that we've only been here a short while. And yet all of the ancient records tell us that it was many, many more thousands of years beyond that. And that, I'm not going to be able to get into all of that in this video because, these videos end up being a long, hour-long thing, and I can't get all the information in each video. But I will eventually cover this more in depth about the times, the shars, the 360 degrees of our circle, the 3,600 degrees. Even in the Bible, a time, a day for a year, I have given thee a day for a year. And the Lord says, a day unto the Lord is like 1,000 years. All of this fits perfectly together with this ancient way of understanding time. Sometimes when you read in the Bible, it talks about a time, like in the Revelation, it talks about a time, times, and a half a time. Okay, that time, and a half a time. The time is a shar. It's 360 degrees. It can mean 3,600 or simply a 360 degrees, because the word, it's like the word period, a period of time. Sometimes it means a day and sometimes it means a year. So this is where it becomes confusing. But I want to get into that more in depth in another video. But what I'm trying to get at here is that it encompasses a lot of information. And if you don't know to start with when you're reading about the time that you're reading and the place, because sometimes it mentions places, and a lot of people are speculating, well, this is long before the flood, and he's talking about Samaria, and we know where Samaria is, but that's after the flood. And of course, everything was destroyed in the flood, so maybe it's not the same place. But you see, if you can read the entire thing, you make opinions as you're reading, and you find out when you get done reading that there's a lot of things you didn't know. And you find out later as you read. One of the things you find out is that after the flood, they rebuilt all the same cities in the same places. And of course, our Bible tells us that when Noah rested, the ark rested on Mount Ararat. Well, it's exactly the same place that it says it rested there in the Sumerian Tablets. And when the ships of Nibiru came back to the earth, because they all left the earth during the flood, because they didn't want to die, of course. And when they returned, they were able, the whole earth was destroyed, so they had no landmarks. And they originally had been landing in a place that people have speculated was Baalbek, where there's these huge stones, where it's the landing place of the gods. Well, we can prove that that is absolutely the right place, because it mentions that Ararat, there are 2 mountain peaks that they used to guide themselves, and then they needed 2 other peaks at the other end of the landing path. And there, at the southern end, which we find later is Egypt, there weren't any mountains. So they made 2 artificial mountains, and these are the Great Pyramids. And if you draw a line from the Mount Ararat down to the Great Pyramid, you will see it runs right straight through Baalbek, and that's where their ships were guided by these mountains. And they flew in from the Ararat direction between the 2 mountains, and they could see the shining pyramids with the golden capstone, and it shined, and there were crystals inside, and computers, and all kinds of, technological stuff, amazing stuff that guided these, spaceships, huge motherships from far, millions and millions of light years away. They came to the Earth from Nibiru, possibly from Alcyon and Cyrus, and they landed by using these 2 mountains, Mount Ararat, lining it up with the pyramid down in Egypt, because they're way up in the sky, and as they're coming down, they can see the capstone. It says it shone, and it made this brilliant light, and it's a direct pathway between Baalbek. Look it up on the map, and you'll see that. And this tells us that Ararat is the place of the landing that it speaks of in the Sumerian Tablets. And this also tells us that the place that we know now as the pyramids of Giza, and there in Egypt, this is the place that they created. And it explains why they made the pyramids. I mean, we've been speculating about the pyramids for a long time, friends, but these tablets have been around for a while. So why don't we know the answers? Why doesn't everybody know what I'm telling you now? Because people don't want to open their eyes. They want to either say it's myth, or they want to say it's too stupid, it's confusing, it doesn't make sense. Well, you've got to study it out. It's just like the Bible. There are a lot of people who say the Bible's not true because this doesn't make sense, or it contradicts itself here or there. But those of you who study it, you know that it doesn't contradict at all. However, there are some things that are in the Bible that we have not understood until now. And the key to all of this, friends, is there in the Sumerian and Akkadian, Babylonian, and Egyptian tablets. So, friends, I think I'm going to close there because this is a good place to stop. I can't, put everything in one video, but I'll come back to you with some more exciting information, and we'll study these ancient tablets, and we'll get to the bottom of this, friends. This here is David Vos. You guys have a great week, and I'm going to be signing out.